everybody. Hi, thank you for coming to junior parent night. We're going to get started. I know people will trickle in, but I wanted to, first of all, thank you for being here. I am new to the team, so if you don't recognize me, it's because I am new. Ms. Beverly Nicholson retired coming into this year, so if you had a student who was working with Ms. Nicholson, she'll be now working with me. Again, my name is Justin Smith. And the rest of the team that is here for the most part, Ms. Lukovich, who you know right here, Mr. Fitzgerald is over there, and our head of the department, Ms. Mancuso, is in the back there. Mrs. Carney, who is another counselor here, isn't going to be able to join us tonight. And then, of course, most of you probably know Mrs. Smock, who is the first person here in our department, will also not be joining us tonight, but they are all part of our team. So tonight, and what tonight is all about, is just introducing you and the basics of what your junior student will see and what the discussion will look like as it relates to post-secondary planning and post-secondary plans, whatever those plans may be. A general overview of what tonight will look like. First of all, what is that plan? Second, if that plan is college, 2-year or 4-year college, we'll go over both of those options. How do you conduct that search? Number 3, SATs and ACTs. This is one of the most heavily asked questions we have about which to take and when to take. It doesn't matter. And what did COVID do to SAT and SATs? We'll talk a little about that later as well. The Common App itself, aka applying to college, the paperwork online. Deadlines around those colleges, and then finally the college questionnaire, which is something we require from all of our students who are applying to college. So as a guidance department, our job is to help advocate for you and your student to arrive at whatever that plan after high school is. And a lot of the path for your student has been 9th, 10th, and now 11th grade, building a strong repertoire for grades, building good study habits, getting the GPA up, getting the class rank up, but more importantly, taking classes that challenge and interest them on a daily basis. This chart up here, which you can see, it's a little easier to see on the paper in front of you, kind of lists the different paths and options there are for students to take. And again, we're not here to judge, push, or do anything other than support a student and family down the path that the student sees as the best fit for themselves. For some students, all the way on the right side here, the vast majority, I think it's 82% as of last year, students will look to get a 4-year degree. That's the bachelor's degree, and that's where a lot of the application time is spent. A step before that, 2-year college tends to be an option for students who may decide that a 4-year college is not for them based on cost, based on their overall readiness for the academic program, or 1,000 other reasons based on their own situations. And then finally, the last 2 columns, if school, as the students call it, is not the path. There are trade schools and there are internships and specialty schools available that we have a lot of knowledge about. And then finally, a lot of students might just want to work, and that's okay too. And whether that's a part-time job or whatever it may be, it's a path for some students when they finish their time here at OA. And then finally, things like the services, students who, Air Force, military, things along those lines. Obviously, those are family conversations, but it is a path and one that we help students to support, and we help them to take the steps to go down that road, and a lot of that starts with junior year. So where to start? For students, now is the time, literally, when we come back from break, the plan is we start seeing junior students on a regular basis. There's a point later on in the term where we'll see them on a group basis, but for now, there's one-on-one meetings that will be scheduled in the coming weeks with your student and their counselor. The second piece is the conversation happening at home. Those conversations with us and those in our guidance offices are a lot more fruitful if those conversations are happening at home. And those conversations they can be simple. What are you thinking you want to do after high school? College? Do you want to stay close? Do you want to go far away? Do you want to study engineering, forensic science, whatever it may be? Those family conversations can help really to inform those next steps for us, but also can advance the conversation and the thought for the student. On the guidance website, you'll see listed there, I'm sure people have been there before, but there are a lot of new tools added all the time. Mrs. Carney does a really good job at upkeeping things online so that we have the most current tools on there for students to use. The two main ones that you'll hear about tonight, and you'll hear about a lot, are Naviance and College Board. Naviance is an electronic platform that every student has an account for. So I know some of you parents have been on it already too. But it is a college research tool, but it is also where students would eventually, we send transcripts, we do all the college application things on that website. College Board is my personal favorite research tool. I use it to research schools in fit, and we'll show you more about that one as well. But College Board is also the place where you take AP exams, you sign up for SATs. Again, we'll get to that one as well. So choosing a college, there's a lot to think about. The one thing that I do want to emphasize is this is a stressful process for students, and it was stressful for me. I can't imagine being a kid in 2022 and dealing with all that 2023 brings, but on top of that, applying to college. It's a lot. We see a lot of overwhelmed students just with their academics, and then you throw the thought of college and what are you doing after this on top of that. It's a lot. So a lot of what we stress in the guidance office is the ability to find balance, the ability to kind of work through what your decision looks like, but to also not to drive yourself crazy along the way. When you think about what colleges that a student might be interested in, we have a big bias. I think this is a countrywide thing toward four-year schools. Four-year schools are what you should do. They are the answer. And if you're not doing a four-year school, what are you doing? That's not the case. Two-year schools, four-year schools, and technical trade schools, they all have values. They all have different meanings to different students. I have students who are applying to various unions and various trade schools and have internships that frankly are excited to do it. They are so looking forward to leaving OA just to get in that world. And then two-year colleges, they're also a good stepping stone for students who aren't quite sure about college either. But all three options as a conversation are good to have at home because they're the conversation we're having here too. Public versus private school. UMass, Amherst, Pittsburgh State, those are examples of public schools. The short version of it, public schools tend to be a little more affordable when they're in Massachusetts and you're from Massachusetts. Private schools, often they are a little more costly, and that's the main difference between the two. Obviously, every school is a little different. One of my conversations with students almost right off the bat is the size of school. I ask them, would you be comfortable in a college that's the size of Oliver Ames? And most students laugh in my face and say, no, I need something bigger than this. And I say, all right, well, let's look at something like Regis, 2,000 students, which is a little bigger. You can see Bentley University has, it's technically a medium-sized school, and then more than 15,000 at a school like UMass Amherst, which has about 30,000 some odd students. That's a large school, and that one scared me when I was looking for schools back in the day, so I knew I needed a smaller school. But those conversations and you and your students seeing colleges together can be really fruitful in terms of what they want to experience when they go to a college. I stepped my foot onto UMass Amherst and said, this is not for me, this is a huge place, and I need a smaller place, and I was supported for my decision. And I think a lot of students, that size of school is a big thing when it relates to comfort. Setting, rural, urban, suburban. You'll know them when you step onto them, but every school, like the Boston universities of the world, are housed in the middle of the city. Some students love that. Some students do not love that. And so that being more of technically that's an urban setting, but having a feel for that, those are also filters within the College Board search tools, so you can see what you like and search more of the colleges that you do like. Location, New England, the East Coast, West Coast, where exactly would a student want to be? Most students start out with this big range of, I want to go to Los Angeles. And then all of a sudden they get a little later and they say, maybe not Los Angeles, I'll go to like Philadelphia. And then they step back a little further and they typically end up a little closer to home, but it's not the case for everybody. I have a few students going abroad to different countries for next year. And then finally, cost and financial aid. That one becomes more of a conversation as you enter into senior year when we talk about things like FAFSA, financial aid, how much a college costs in general. As you walk into the conversation, you'll sit in information sessions and tours, and they'll give you numbers and general ballpark figures, but you won't know the cost and financial aid until you really get to the end of the road once you get into 12th grade. The thing you should know, colleges, they are very expensive. In the private schools, even more so than the public schools for the most part. Every school has a different price tag. Every school is differently good at giving financial aid or not giving financial aid. So as you do the equations as to what school will cost a lot of money, Tufts, for example, costs $75,000, but they also meet 100% of financial need in terms of if you apply there and get financial aid. So they are a big price tag school, but they also offer a lot of benefits too. Just know that it's a running equation in terms of what that cost and financial aid looks like. But every conversation in choosing a college is different with a student, depending on what they want, what they're passionate about, and frankly, where they see themselves after OA. The majors and the side of I have to decide what to do for the rest of my life as a high school senior is a very scary thought for seniors, and I encourage them not to be at that spot. Where I encourage students to be is at a spot where I think I like science, I think I like biology, I think I like social studies or political science. That gives them a direction to look at for a college. It's sometimes a very scary thought to say, I'm 18 and I want to be a doctor and that's what I will do. And some students do that and do very well. But ultimately, you want a student to be exploring a college that offers a major or several majors that they like, that they are interested in, and a college that does it well. And in terms of are there specific admissions criteria for specific majors, if you want to be into nursing or you want to go into a field that has very specific requirements, it's important to know just because nursing has specific science prerequisites to get into a program. Admissions criteria, looking at the school profiles, if you know you have interest in UMass Amherst, if you go on UMass Amherst admissions website, they'll tell you the average GPA to be here, the average SAT to be here, if they require it. Housing options, sports and activities, and specialized options. Different colleges offer different amenities. Housing options, you'll get your traditional dorms if you have a student who wants to live on those dorms. Knowing what they look like, students seeing them and spending time at those colleges is a good thing. Sports and activities, every college will offer a number of clubs and organizations. There are some students interested in Division I, Division II, Division III sports, not just to play, but also for the culture that those things bring. I had a lot of students apply to Clemson this year just because they were big football and it was an atmosphere that students wanted to be in. I don't know that they'll actually go to Clemson, but that interest and that feel and that community thing is very real. Then for specialized options, co-ed or single-sex schools, fraternities and sororities, religious affiliations, disability support. There are schools that are specifically tailored to support several or only a few of these things. There are fraternities and sororities available for the social interactions. There are religious affiliated schools. There are the Jesuit schools, networks. If you have interest in specialized schools, just know that it is a part of the Naviance and College Board search filters, where if you and your student are researching a particular type of school, you are able to. And then finally, if your student is currently utilizing an IEP or a 504, there are schools that they all offer services of a variety of kinds to help support your student academically once they're there. And before I hand it off to Mr. Fitzgerald here, the biggest question we get is, what do I need to do for my student to get into X, Y, and Z school? What will they be looking at the most? And that answer has changed a lot over the years. This survey is, I think, 3 years old, if I remember correctly. The top answer still stays the same. The number one thing that colleges are looking for is your grades in college prep classes, your grades in AP level classes, and your grades in honors level classes. It's the number one indicator. So it's not just GPA and rank. It's, did you challenge yourself as a student? Did you work your hardest? And what do your grades look like in those classes, especially the ones you're saying you have interest in studying? If you're studying nursing, what do your biology grades look like? The second one down here is standardized admissions tests. We'll talk more about that later on. That probably not 59% anymore. A lot of colleges have started to care less about standardized admissions tests like the SATs and the ACTs. That changes again on a year-to-year basis. As you go down a little further, grades, class rank, again, that's kind of affiliated with the course grades a bit. As you get into senior year, your student will ask for things like college recommendations from a teacher. They'll ask for a teacher's insight as to how your student performs in the classroom. Colleges care about that a lot. An essay to write example. The college essay, you'll talk more about that into the summer and into senior year, but colleges want to know that your student can be insightful, that your student can write at a very high level, and they want to show that some personality in that college essay, and that's something that we help out with in guidance. That's something that the English department helps with as well. And the last three things, students demonstrated interest. The one thing that I really want to point to is this phrase, demonstrated interest. Colleges care if your student has been there before. A student who has seen, visited, emailed, called Bentley 5 times, and has the same GPA as another student who has seen that place 0 times, has not called, has not emailed. The student who's seen the place, they keep records of those entries, they keep records of those emails, they keep records of those phone calls. So that demonstrated interest does carry a lot of weight because it shows that you're serious about it, which is why we always push students to see schools, go take tours, have conversations, call up admissions, send emails, because that demonstrated interest does carry a lot of weight. And then the final 2 things, interview and then extracurricular activities. Interview, again, that's more senior year, but down the line, colleges who do perform interviews want to speak to your student. They want to see how your student would react in a person-to-person conversation. Can they hold their own, and also can they be insightful about their own high school experience? And then extracurricular activities. If your student's not involved in something, clubs, activities, if they're not working outside of school, babysitting, colleges want to know that your student is spending their time in effective ways outside of school, and it doesn't have to be they're in president of student government or something like that. That can be something, but they like to see continued work in specific clubs or fields of interest. Colleges love students who work. Colleges love students who have a job. Colleges like it when students perform tasks at home to care for the family if they're watching a little brother or sister. And they love, too, the academic and sports that they participate within school itself. So again, it's a lot to say, but ultimately, if your student right now is working hard, keeping their grades up, and they're involved, they're 2 good steps in a really good direction. I'm going to invite Mr. Fitz up here now. He's going to talk about Naviance and kind of guide you through what it looks like, and just know that your student does have access to this account currently.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. And Mr. Smith is not going to go too far away because he is going to be my Vanna White in just a minute and actually navigate the college search as I talk through it. But kind of in short, and I met with my first 2 juniors today, so it's exciting for me to kind of dip my toes back in the water of this conversation. But kind of the 2 big picture items that certainly I think I try and highlight, I think we all try and highlight when we're initially meeting with the juniors. And this is still very early in the process, but you are all here. You are starting this process with us early. To me, the 2 large goals that we have for the juniors between now and really going into summertime are, 1, to build their college list, which is easy to say and much harder to do, as Mr. Smith just kind of covered in depth all the factors that could go into what might be important to a student. But ideally, we would like them to be able to get to summertime feeling, reasonably speaking, like they have an idea of where they might want to apply and why they might want to apply there. Because what we'll talk about a little bit more when we talk perhaps about Common App, I'll mention it a little bit more when we dive into Naviance more specifically, but what students will ultimately find and what you all will ultimately find in helping your students is that every college is unique in that many colleges have similar requirements and similar timelines and similar expectations, but that isn't necessarily always the case, that they're nuanced. And some colleges might have a slightly earlier deadline. Some colleges might have a slightly different way they want you to apply to their school. Some colleges might have, and oftentimes do have, specific essay requirements that are unique to their college. And those, for many students, are oftentimes the most time-intensive part of the application, the writing that goes involved, or that's involved with applying to school. So for a lot of kids, if we can kind of help them get to summertime knowing where it is they might want to apply, it gives them the opportunity perhaps to tackle some of the nuts and bolts in the application process over the summer, so they're able to come back into school come fall feeling a little bit more confident about where they are in the process, because many of those deadlines that colleges have come early in the fall of senior year, and sometimes can sneak up on kids if they don't necessarily know that they're coming up. And then the second part of the process that we definitely encourage kids to talk or think about now, and you guys all to help them think about, is just squaring away their standardized testing plan, which I know Mr. Smith talked about a little bit already, and Ms. Mancuso is going to talk about a little bit more. And that doesn't even necessarily mean that they're taking the SATs or the ACTs. We have many students that have applied to college and selected colleges and were admitted to college and are going to college without ever having taken the SATs or the ACTs. But every student's situation is unique, and oftentimes they don't necessarily know yet if they're going to be applying only to test optional colleges or not. So in the interest of kind of keeping all of their options open, if your child is considering taking the SATs or the ACTs, then helping them schedule those exams this spring or this summer so that their testing is largely squared away and completed upon entering senior year, that again takes one less barrier away from them in the process of applying to college, and it's one more piece of the puzzle they already have completed prior to feeling like they're ready to send their applications out. So the SAT and ACT part of the process is like Mr. Smith said, kind of a conversation that generates a lot of questions. But to me, the part that I certainly enjoy a little bit more working with students is the actual college search piece of this. And so what we want to do is just walk you through Naviance certainly, and then talk a little bit about College Board too, to show you what the search engines look like, so that if you wanted to, you can even go through this process with your students, or at least kind of know how they are navigating this process and what they're seeing and how they are accessing some of this information. So, Mr. Smith, if you could toggle over to the next screen. And actually it is, there we go. So this is what the main page for Naviance looks like, and this is our pretend student. This is Adam Hardbark is his name, so he was first alphabetically for us. And so within Naviance, there's several tools embedded into the program, but primarily what we are using with our juniors currently, and what we'll be using with them moving forward, is the college feature within Naviance. And there's a college tab at the very top of the screen, and when you select it, it generates a whole bunch of college search pieces. As your children and as your students build their college list and save their information, it will be saved into a tab within Naviance titled Colleges I'm Thinking About. If, like most students at this point, they are still figuring out where it is that they want to apply, the options on what is my now left-hand side of the screen under Find Your Fit are all different search criteria, and the one at the top of the list within Naviance is my personal favorite. It's called the Supermatch College Search. And basically what it is a search engine with several different hyperlinked criteria, and the more information students put into that search engine, the narrower the list of matching colleges becomes. They can ultimately be so specific, and oftentimes are, that their list of currently about 4,000 colleges prior to putting any information in can kind of quickly become 0 colleges because they put so much information in that it shrinks the list down to nothing. So kind of our ask of them is to really try and think about the features of college that, like Mr. Smith mentioned before, are kind of the most important factors to them early on or initially, and then use that to generate perhaps their early list of schools. But at the top of the screen, there's, and I'm not going to ask Mr. Smith to click on all of them, but there's filters for location, so they can search by state, by region, or even by proximity to zip code, so they can search for colleges within a 50-mile radius of here, perhaps. I'll take the question now, but then we also definitely will take questions at the end too. Yes.
How to get to super search from Naviance?
Yes. So when you're, Mr. Smith, if you can jump back to the home page. So every student has an account, and when they log in, this is the screen that they will see. On the top hand, and I know the lighting is a little challenging, so I apologize for that. But at the top of the screen are several tabs. One of the tabs is titled College. And when you select that College tab, a drop-down list of options appear. Under the side of the screen that's titled Find Your Fit are where the college search options are. And within the Find Your Fit tab, or section, the very first one is the Supermatch, which I think is the most in-depth of the search criteria. And so we've actually previously done this a little bit with Adam Aardvark and populated a list of schools based on a couple different criteria. But I will say for most students, location tends to be a big point of conversation. So, many students feel very passionately that there's a point where a college might feel too far away or too close to home. And so what we certainly encourage them to do is start those conversations with you all very early in the process, because you are just as important a part of that conversation as they are. Like, I will candidly tell students who tell me that they want to go to California to go to college, my very first question is, do your parents know that? And if they say no, I will not so bluntly, but in my head I will say, you are not going to college in California. Because it has to be a group effort. It's not, I met with a student, actually one of the students today, and it was the opposite conversation. They said, I actually think I want to live at home and commute to college. And I said, do your parents know that? And they said, no. And I said, you probably want to have that conversation too, because they may have plans for your room. But either way, the location part of it is a big one. Other pretty common ones, candidly, are proximity to or away from a city, like Mr. Smith mentioned. There, you can certainly search and filter by area of study. For many students, like Mr. Smith mentioned, that's a tough one to initially perhaps wrap their heads around for a lot of kids. But we also do have many kids who will meet with us and say, yup, I know what major it is, and I confidently know what major it is, and it's this. And for example, nursing. And if it is nursing, then that's a great way to narrow their list of schools down. Another very useful tool is the selectivity of the college, that you can search for colleges based on, generally speaking, several selectivity criteria, so that ultimately kids are not only looking for schools that feel like that are a good fit for them, but hopefully in turn they also feel like they're a good fit for the college academically as a student, that ultimately they feel like they're applying appropriately to colleges they have a reasonable chance to feel like they could be admitted to. And you can do that based on GPA, you can do that based on selectivity of the college. Colleges that, that Naviance, for example, breaks it down to colleges that accept fewer than 25% students, between a quarter and half of the students who apply, or perhaps more than half of the students apply, and ultimately colleges that accept the majority of the students that apply. And that's not even to imply that kind of the less selective the college is, the worse the college is, because that is not the case. And oftentimes kids have particular schools in mind, and they feel pretty confident that they're admissible to that particular college. And that doesn't make it a bad thing. That actually makes it an excellent thing. That they feel pretty strongly that they have a school in mind that they have a good chance of being admitted to, because one, likely they will be admitted, and two, oftentimes when you are a strong applicant to a college, like Mr. Smith spoke about financial aid earlier, students oftentimes are more likely to receive more competitive merit-based financial aid offers based on their academics when they are a particularly strong student academically that's admitted to a particular college. So it's not to say that we only want students applying to colleges that feel like they are kind of above or at best kind of within their admissions standards. If they have schools in mind that they feel confident in their admissions to and they can still see themselves going to there, all the better. But ultimately, as they build their list, once they get to a point where they've entered some of the more important features, as Mr. Smith scrolls down a little bit, and I will move my gigantic head out of the way, what will happen is it will generate a list of colleges that appears, again, on my left-hand side of the screen. It will indicate the percentage match that college was for your student based on their filter criteria. And then it will give some information about the college right up front. A lot of times it will tell the average GPA of admitted students at that school, and it will list your student's GPA so that they can kind of compare their likelihood of admissions. And what I would say is probably kind of within 3/10 of GPA points, I think kind of puts the school kind of well within a good fit range for a kid. So, you know, our pretend student has a 3.2 GPA. I'm looking at Temple University that on average selects students with a 3.4 GPA. I think that's probably likely a good fit college for that particular student. They also oftentimes may list the SAT scores on average that the college would expect to see from that from an admitted student, and then as your students take the SATs, we will also populate their scores in Ames too, so that can be another point of comparison. If a student has a school in mind, what they can do is they can select that college in Ames to learn a little bit more about it. So Mr. Smith, if you want to select, actually if you want to scroll up, my father-in-law went to Sacred Heart, and I saw Sacred Heart was up there, so I am going to make a point to tell him that we highlighted Sacred Heart when I get home. And what will happen when the student selects a college, on the main page, they will get a combination of oftentimes some pictures and or kind of promotional videos as provided by that college, and then typically some kind of quick facts about the school underneath. So right out of the gate, it will tell us a little bit about the graduation rate, acceptance rate, and the average cost of attendance at Sacred Heart, and that is an adjustable figure based on your family income. And then it will give some basic information, oftentimes a blurb, and some general information in bullet point form, as provided by the college again. If you scroll back to the top of the screen, there are then several hyperlinks that run across the center of the page. So it tells you studies, and what it will do under studies is it will tell you all the majors at a particular college. It may be an overwhelming amount of information, other than for many students, it can sometimes validate their area of interest, knowing that a certain major is a top area of study at a particular college. So what Naviance will do, it will highlight some of the more popular majors or popular areas of study at certain colleges. And sometimes kids feel kind of validated knowing that what they might study isn't necessarily a niche major per se at that particular college. Under student life, it will give a little bit more data about the student population that attends that college. So it will tell you how many undergraduate students attend that college, also if there are graduate students and how many of those students attend the college, how far away that college is from the nearest city and what that city is, because obviously Fairfield is not necessarily New York City, but it is a city nonetheless. It tells you to the mile how far away it is from Oliver Ames High School. And then it tells you the percentage of students that live on the campus. Underneath it will then give you some demographics about the student population based on ethnicity, based on gender, based on age. And the way they do age is under 24, under 24 being what they would probably term a typical college-age student. And then lastly, residency and international students. So residency being the amount of students attending that college who are from the state that that college is in. And then obviously international students are students coming from other countries outside of the United States. So kind of the information in Naviance on the college pages oftentimes are a good opportunity to validate for students that that particular school kind of remains a school they want to learn a little bit more about. And if they have a school that they learned about, whether it's through Naviance, Mr. Smith highlighted, and actually truthfully I think I agree, College Board has a similar search engine that sometimes also is worth using. It generates oftentimes a similar group of colleges, but has slightly different search criteria, so sometimes it can generate a slightly different list of matching schools. But what Naviance does that is very helpful for students, if you scroll back to the top of the screen, Mr. Smith, actually it's right there, under admissions, we will have OA-specific data listed in Naviance via a scatter grid. And essentially, it is a portion of an XY axis with GPA being listed on the Y-axis, I hope I am right, and SAT scores being listed on the X-axis, which is the bottom line running across. And then as your students have their academic information, it will also be available for them to compare themselves to other Oliver Ames students that reported decisions back at that particular college. So it gives a little bit more of an apples-to-apples comparison for their particular chances at a school that they're interested in. Now, the way the data points work in Sacred Heart, don't tell my father-in-law this, is a school that we've had a lot of success at. It doesn't mean that everyone gets into Sacred Heart, but the students that have applied in the last couple of years all have. So we only have green check marks. We might look at another school and see several what are rejections designated by the way of being red X's. And then there also may be circles, which are essentially students that indicated they were waitlisted, or in other words, the college said maybe, and they would let the students know in the summertime after graduation if they ultimately could be accepted. So where Sacred Heart sort of looks this way with a bunch of green check marks, a lot of scattergrams are sort of a blend of green check marks, circles, and red X's. And every one of these data points, and we don't tell you who the prior students are, but every one of these data points is a student with a story and a background, and they are more than just the academic data that is listed in a scattergram in Naviance, but it is a good data point to use because oftentimes academics is one of the first things colleges are going to consider. You know, what this isn't showing is, you know, if a student applied for a selective major, you know, that you might have, or if the student was a student athlete and was being recruited at that college, and maybe, you know, we have some scattergrams where you see some X's for students that were, by the looks of it, much stronger applicants than other students at a college that applied and were admitted. Also, sometimes we get different admissions decisions one year to the next. And this is data that goes back about 5 years. So this is not an exact science by any means, but it is a good place to check just to make sure that the colleges your students are considering are reasonable for them to think that they have a chance of admissions to. And we're never going to tell a student you can't apply to a school, but as we're working with them, we realize that they are targeting primarily schools where it feels like the likelihood of admission is perhaps slim to daunting. We'll have that conversation. We'll be honest with them and say, you know, you might want to diversify your search a little bit with regards to selectivity, because we don't want a situation where kids are applying and getting rejections back. And then honestly what happens is, you know, they get 1 or 2 rejections, and then all of a sudden they apply to 20 more schools because they get really nervous. And so our goal is to kind of help them build a list early on that's a good fit, like I mentioned before, both personally and academically. Kind of once they have a school in mind, if you look at the top of the screen, next to the college's name is this nice little heart, and you can select it. And what that does is it saves it to the student's application list. It doesn't mean they have to apply, but it allows us as their counselors to see colleges that they're considering. And it ultimately kind of creates and builds a working list of colleges students may be interested in. And you'll also see underneath that, and Mr. Smith, I'm going to actually ask you to click on this, every college in Naviance is hyperlinked to the school's website. And really, once a student has a college in mind, the next step is going to that college's website to really then access some more specific information as provided by the college. So, Mr. Smith, if you would indulge me and select Sacred Heart, a college's website tends to be way more interactive. So Naviance and College Board are very useful tools because all the information is always in the same place. College websites tend to be a little bit more unique to the specific college, but generally speaking, where we are encouraging students to go are kind of 2 places to start. And oftentimes colleges will have an admissions link and an academics link. And within the admissions page, they will provide you or your students information on how to visit their campus. And like Mr. Smith mentioned before, getting on college campuses is perhaps the biggest step in sort of validating a student's priorities. That everywhere sounds great in theory, or everything sounds great in theory, until they take a 4-hour drive to upstate New York and realize that 4 hours maybe is too long. So the act of visiting and being on a college campus goes a long way. And colleges offer a wide range of ways to visit their particular college. So not every college offers every visit opportunity, but almost every college will offer some version of a daily visit where you can sign up. Doesn't cost any money, and it's usually going to be a presentation by the admissions office and roughly a 60 to 90-minute tour by a current student who is very energetic and enthusiastic and well-versed at walking backwards as they show you around the campus. And then they also oftentimes will offer more nuanced ways to visit. Perhaps visit days that are unique to a particular major or a particular program at the college. Sometimes they offer something called open houses, which are like daily visits, but with even more information available from other departments like financial aid or student services that might not necessarily be available on a typical daily tour. And then also there's a lot of virtual visit opportunities, which is really helpful, especially if your student is looking at colleges much farther away. Sometimes the starting point is to interact with the college virtually, doing a virtual tour or attending a remote information session before necessarily deciding that it's worthwhile to schedule a flight and visit a college in another part of the country. So, admissions page is a really useful part, and then if ultimately students do build their list, every college is going to offer an academics page too. And the academics page is where colleges will list and tell you all about their specific majors and programs of study. And like Mr. Smith mentioned, it's probably not the first thing kids are going to consider, but ultimately, if they have certain that they might want to apply to, then they can learn about those majors on the academics page at the colleges they ultimately are interested in. So that if they can get to a place where they're applying to colleges with a declared major, that sometimes can be helpful, especially if they become interested in a major that has a different set of admissions criteria. UMass Amherst, for example, only will admit incoming freshmen into their nursing program, into their business program, and into their engineering program. So if students are potentially interested in those majors at UMass, it really behooves them to apply initially into those programs. So giving them the opportunity to eventually learn a little bit more about the specific areas of study at a college also becomes kind of a helpful part in that process. So that's kind of a long-winded version of the college search piece of the puzzle that we're kind of working with your students on currently, and we'll be kind of walking them through over the next couple of weeks. Mrs. Mancuso will come up and talk a little bit more about the standardized testing part of the puzzle.
Thank you very much. Everyone's still with us? I know it's a lot to digest, but I think it's a lot of good information. And just remember too, if this is your first time going through this experience, we are all also available individually if you want to follow conversations or phone calls or meetings or whatever. I'm going to switch over now to talk about standardized testing, one of the least favorite subjects, the other one being finances. But one thing I will mention tonight, we really don't dive into finances too much tonight, only because financially in that piece of the process happens later on in the fall. So if you've ever heard of the FAFSA, which is something we will talk about later on in September, the FAFSA doesn't even open until October 1st, 2023. So what will happen tonight, this is more just the overview of things to do now, summer and spring and summer, to get ready for the fall. And then in September, we'll have a senior parent night where we talk more about the nuts and bolts and the logistics of how to actually complete and execute the applications and who sends out what. And then in October, there'll be a financial aid session to walk you through that piece as well. So I just want to mention that. So standardized testing, obviously in the last few years, it's been really wonky. With COVID, a lot of schools were starting to move towards test optional anyway, but in light of COVID, many more went test optional. At this point, some are now reassessing to decide if they're going to remain test optional. Some have announced that they are going to start transitioning back to requiring testing. So unfortunately, you have a child who could be applying to 8 or 9 schools. You may have a variety of requirements for each of those, so we'll just have to look through their schools to see what is required. You will hear different phrases, test Testing is required, testing is optional, and then you'll also hear test blind, so we'll talk about that. Standardized testing, so there are two options available, and I think most of you are more familiar with the SAT, which is offered through College Board. There is another standardized test called the ACT, and that, for whatever reason, just different trends across parts of the country utilize that more. You'll see a lot of southern schools or Western schools utilize the ACT. It just happens in New England, the SAT is more popular. What I always say to families is, if they say, which, test should my child take? I always say it's like Visa or MasterCard. Colleges will accept either, so it's really a matter of looking to see which test might match your child better. We do provide a handout where it talks a little bit about the breakdown of each one. Should I take both? We've had kids ask this question. Should I take the SAT and the ACT just to see how I do? That is an option, but I really would suggest that, at this point where many schools are still test optional, I would lean towards just doing one or the other, whether that's the SAT or the ACT. And then again, that's all, in an instance where they may need to even take a test. They may look at schools that are all test optional. And then for students maybe not a strong test taker, say, I'm not taking it at all. But again, I think the handout we've provided is really helpful in understanding both the tests. And if you're not certain, we can, talk to you and your child individually about what might work better for them, whether it's that SAT or that ACT. How many times should I take it? Well, again, where many schools are test optional, we've still encouraged kids to say, let's take it at least once, have those scores in your back pocket, just in case you do decide to pick a school that requires it. But I would say 2 times is typically the standard number to take the test. I've had kids take it 3 times, that's fine. I would say no more than that because their scores are just going to plateau and you're not going to see a lot of deviation in scores after that, second or third attempt. So I would say at least 1 time, 2 times is great. Unless you have a kid who's just really trying to push and improve a score somewhere because they need it, then you can maybe do it a 3rd time, but certainly no more than that. How are they used by schools? So, at this point, again, some schools still require them. You'll see that more in southern colleges, typically like North Carolina and down. We've seen even through COVID, they've required the SATs. And there are some schools, again, just in general, sprinkled throughout the country that require it. They will, if they require it, they're certainly going to look at those scores to make a determination. A lot of colleges take what's called a holistic approach, and they look at a wide variety of factors. As Mr. Smith referenced on one of those slides in terms of, what's important to a school. So a lot of them will still take, if they require them, they'll take those scores into consideration in that overall picture of a student's performance. The schools that are test optional. Now, if a student takes the test and they still fall within that score range that college likes to see, or even Excel exceeds that test range score, it's still nice, even if they're test optional. If your child has done well, we would still recommend you send those scores along. It's a nice feather in their cap. It's just an additional feature that can be considered in their application process. If your child is just not a strong test taker, their grades are strong, they have a lot of academics, they have a great essay, but their SATs or ACTs are just not strong, don't send them. Literally, no harm, no foul. They will not be penalized. If it's a test optional school, they will not be penalized for not sending those scores. They just will not be factored into their application. And then, as I mentioned, there are some schools that are test blind, which means they don't look at scores at all. Whether you send them or not, they are not factoring them in at all in their process. Stonehill, for example, is a test blind school, okay? So you don't see that as often, but if it pops up, what's test blind, it just means that it's not even considered whatsoever in the process. So how they're factored in, it's really just for those schools that still require testing. And again, as I mentioned, it's just that holistic approach. They look at all different pieces of a student, including the test scores, just to see how they did. When do you send them? Before we even get to that, when do you sign up? Okay, so at this point, there are 3 that are coming up in the spring: March, May, and June. At this point, I would say it's really just what works best for your student and your schedule. March, I would only encourage if your child is doing pre-calculus. If they're in Algebra 2, I would hold off until May or June when they have accumulated more content. But if they're doing pre-calc, they can certainly try the March one if they like. We offer the test here in May, and then we offer it again in November of senior year. Now, let's say you pick June, that's what works for you guys. When you go to register for the test, you'll enter, the high school and your home address, and it will show locations in the surrounding area that offer the test. So again, if June works for you, we don't have it here, but they could take it at Brockton High, maybe at Bridgewater State, somewhere around there. That window should be open, so at any point you can go on and register, and then they have their seat, and it's available. Testing will run again in August, October, and November. So let's say the spring doesn't work, or they miss it, or they get sick, or they do take it, and they want to take it again. August, October, and November would be the next times to take it. Okay. When do you send scores? That doesn't happen. We'll talk about that more in September of the senior parent night, but that will be part of the process when they send out their application. So that won't be happening until the fall. So we can kind of revisit that question. And then the last piece, we talked about that. Okay. So this is the website for College Board. College Board is how you will sign up for the SAT. College Board oversees AP testing, PSATs, and SAT testing. So if your child doesn't have an account, they log on, create an account, and then they can go in, select their test date, their location, pay the fee, they're good to go. Within about 2.5 weeks after testing, they will receive their scores back electronically. They just log onto their account and they can see their scores. Okay. Now again, let's say they don't like them, they're like, these are terrible, no one ever has to see them. They will just sit in their account. There is something called, I was going to say Super Score. There is a feature called Super Score, which means if your child does take the SAT more than once, you can mix and match the highest scores. So let's say the math was really solid in May, the critical reading, they take it again a different month, that critical reading score goes up, they can then mix and match those highest scores to send off to their colleges. So there is somewhat of a benefit if they do take it more than once, to have that feature available. If your child has taken the PSAT, we'll get to tutoring resources, but if they've taken the PSAT, that does give you a kind of a good baseline in understanding how you think they will do with the SAT. And that may also help in a deciding factor of whether they want to take the test at all, the SAT at all, or if they want to try the ACT instead. Okay, so it is in the packet, but just up here so you can see the upcoming test dates. The March 1, the registration is February 10th. They do have a late registration deadline as well, a window as well. So let's say you forget or something happens and you're like, shoot, I gotta sign up. There's still a late window as well. So if you miss these deadlines, you can still usually get in. You may not get your first pick of location, but you can still get in and pay with a later, with an additional fee. The cost in general is $60 to take the SAT. There is no longer that essay section. That has been eliminated. It's not available anymore. It's just the 2 sections listed above. Each section is worth 800 points for a total score of 1,600, which is a perfect score, which is lovely. But yeah, there is no more essay to this piece. Okay. The ACT, as I mentioned, again, it's just another option, really. I think the SAT, people used to look at it and think it was more abstract. Required a lot of critical thinking skills, a lot of deductive reasoning, where I think people find the ACT to be more concrete, more black and white. The testing style is very familiar to kids in terms of how they test here at school. That doesn't make it any easier, but sometimes kids feel more comfortable with the formatting of the ACT. And they do have an additional section, a science section. Does not mean if your child's going to sciences that they have to take the ACT, not at all. But if they like it and they're a strong test taker, they can certainly choose this option. ACT still does offer an essay optional piece if they want to do it or not. That's their choice. Again, if they choose not to do the essay piece, that's totally fine. And there is a differential in the cost depending on whether you do the essay piece or not. Again, in your packet, we've listed available dates. You can see that their ones vary a little bit. So if that works better for you as a family, great. Along with the deadlines. So the ACT is a completely different website. So you would not go to College Board, you would just go directly to actstudent.org and register there. It would be the same thing. You create an account, pick your location, pay the fee, your test date, and you're all set. Same thing. Within a few weeks, the student would log on to their ACT account and see their scores. Okay? Test prep. So, for Khan Academy, I don't know if anyone's familiar with Khan Academy. It's been quite popular over the last several years. They offer a lot of free academic information. They offer free SAT tutoring. So you could go on, a student can go on anytime and do a general SAT prep with them. There's also a test that they can take, just a quick test on Khan Academy. Based on the data the students provide on that test through Khan Academy, they can tailor an SAT tutorial for them. If your child has taken the PSAT, you can link up your child's PSAT scores through College Board to Khan Academy, and again, they will take that data and create a detailed tutorial based on their information. Each year in December, when the PSAT scores come out, we send an email to students and parents with links that show them how to do those things, shows them how to link their accounts. But if you can't find it, or if you need help, just give us a call, we can help you with that. ACT also has their own prep as well. You can go directly to their website. And that actually it's not bad, it's about $40, which was pretty reasonable. Bridgewater State, if you're looking for brick and mortar, if your kid's like, I can't sit in front of a computer, I need like a person. Bridgewater State does a nice job, and that one's actually, $325 is still pricey, but it's still reasonable in comparison to some of the other programs. I know there's a link here, but if you just type it into your computer, it'll pull up and it shows you when the test prep courses are available, and it gets them ready for March, May, and June, and then they'll offer it again in the late summer, early fall for those October and November tests as well. You also have Princeton Review and Kaplan Test Prep. Their prices vary. They can be more expensive, but they have a lot of opportunities to offer. They can do individual tutoring, they can do group tutoring, they can do online tutoring, so that's why the price varies. Obviously, if you're doing individual tutoring, it'll cost more than if you do the group or the online, but again, that's for every family to decide what works for them. Okay. So at this point, I'm going to turn over to Mrs. Luckfitch. She's going to talk about applications and deadlines and the Common App.
Hi, everybody. I'm Colleen Luckfitch. Nice to see you all. I hope people are not feeling overwhelmed. If you haven't done this before, it sounds worse than it really is. It is really not that hard to apply to college. I think it's become like a machine and an industry, and it feels harder and bigger than it really, really is, because it's actually kind of like filling out a job application. And then you just add this nice little essay, and you hit it, and you've applied. The rest of this decision-making is, the work that goes on in your head. But what we try to tell the kids, and I would say we'll tell you as well, there's a college for everybody if you want to go to college. You can start someplace and transfer. You can be happy many places. There is no perfect fit for you. And a lot of kids really think that if I don't get in here, I won't be happy. Not true. You may think you want to go somewhere, you go somewhere else, and you'll be just fine. So the different ways to apply to college, everything's electronic. Nobody applies using paper at all. By far, the most common one is the Common App, the Common Application. Most schools, 700, are on the Common Application, which links with the student's Navigance account. So the student, we actually run a workshop in August if they want to come and get started, or you can open it in August yourself. The kids can open it. It's commonapp.org, create an account, you fill it out, and you just answering these questions. What are my activities? What's my job? What's my GPA? All these questions. And if you don't know the answer, you email your guidance counselor and they say, your GPA is this, your class rank is this. So it's very straightforward. If some of the schools that you're applying to are not on the Common Application, This coalition application holds some of them, but a lot of those are overlapping with the Common App, so I would go toward the Common App, and some schools accept applications from their own application. Such and such university in Endicott, they're not a Common App. What the heck? So silly. And so you would have to apply directly on the website, and you'd have to add it onto Naviance. Naviance is the key for us knowing as staff, teachers, and guidance counselors where the student has applied. If it's not on Naviance, it hasn't happened because we don't know about it. And Common App does that automatically for them. The application fees run from $50 to $100 per school. So you want to not apply to 30. Some colleges offer fee waivers for kids. The kids might get an email. We're offering you a free application to this college. If you have financial difficulty, you can email the guidance counselor, or the kids can come and see us, and we can give fee waivers for schools. We'll go to the next slide. And this is it, commonapp.org. So they can come and sign up and come to our August workshop. It kind of is a nice way to kick it off so that they feel not as overwhelmed, or they can open it up at home and do it themselves or with you. And a lot of kids do this, right through the fall. They save it as they go, and they just work on it a little bit at a time, okay? Here's our workshop, okay? And we'll have sign-ups later in the year. We'll email all the kids and we'll email the parents to tell you when the sign-ups are. And if you miss the sign-up, you can come anyway. Okay. Decisions. So there are 3 types of decisions, or 4 really. Early decision is if you, as a student and a family, have decided, I only want to go to Boston College. My whole family went there, and that's where I want to apply, and if I get in, I'm going to go. You have to actually sign a contract agreeing if you get in, you will go. And the parent signs it, the student signs it, and the guidance counselor signs it. This is only for people that are absolutely positive that's what they want. Early action is for a lot of kids. It's usually by November 1st or November 15th. All it means is you apply by that date, but you don't have to tell them that you're going there until May. So it's kind of a win-win. I love that one because it gets it over and done with, and it doesn't take over the whole senior year and the whole holiday break. I don't always recommend it if your student has had a poor junior year. You may want to wait and show your nice first-term senior year grades if that's the case. I really didn't do well junior year, but first quarter senior year, I got all A's. So if you're not a terrific student, if you're below a 3.0, if you didn't do your best, you might want to wait. And one of the nice things colleges tell us that they do is that they count that first term 4 times. They multiply it by 4, and whatever you got, they kind of will say that we're going to, they all recalculate the grade point average, and they only pull out the main courses. But they also will take your first quarter senior year grade, and they'll give you the benefit of the doubt, and they'll recount that for the whole year. Rolling admissions just means, a regular decision is the next one. That's usually by January 1st, sometimes February, and that's the same thing, just a later deadline. And with all of these, except for early decision, you don't have to give them an answer until May, okay? Rolling admissions means as you apply, they're accepting kids. So it might have a crazy sounding deadline like April or July, but remember, they're filling up because they're accepting students as they come in. So even though it has a late deadline, you probably want to apply within a reasonable time frame. We really love to have the kids all done before they go on the holiday break. We love them to be finished by Thanksgiving or December if they can, because it just is a sign for the whole family and the whole school. Okay, next. Okay, the FAFSA is something we are going to discuss at more length in September, but it's the government website, free application for federal student aid. It's free. Don't ever sign on to FAFSA.com. It's FAFSA.gov, government. And if you want to, you can actually go on there, even now, with an old tax return from last year or this year, and you can do a practice one. And you can see what would my typical expected family contribution be. And the expected family contribution, in many cases, in a working family, is going to be way higher than you think it ever should be. They're going to say, your family can afford $40,000 a year. And you think, really? Where are we getting this money? But the answer they say is that it comes from the ability to take out loans for the money, really. You know, the ability to take it out of cash, savings, pay for it eventually, blah, blah, blah. So I think that's a great piece of knowledge for your family to do that practice FAFSA and know what your expected family contribution is. You will almost never, ever get more than that. And you'll most likely get less than that. And how the expected family contribution works is, if your family contribution is supposed to be $40,000 a year, and UMass costs $30,000, you are getting nothing because you're supposed to be able to pay $40,000. But yet, you're always going to be eligible for the federal loans at a low interest rate that you pay over time. And your student may be eligible for merit aid if they have a grade point average that's above what that college typically looks for. So if you're looking for money, which is, if you have a student that's a 3.5 and they apply to a school that's a 3.0, they might get some money. They might get some merit money. They don't add merit to financial need, they combine it. So if you get that merit money, you're not going to get the need on top of it. You're not going to really ever get more than what FAFSA says you should get with the expected family contribution. Again, that opens October 1st. Some private schools, all the state colleges, all the colleges use the FAFSA, state and private. But some colleges additionally use the CSS profile on top of the FAFSA. And some use their own application on top of that. And some use this thing called IDOC, where you're expected to send in your tax returns. So when you finally apply, you really have to look at the financial aid website of every single college, because they're all asking for different things. And you don't want to miss an opportunity to get some money. We're going to go over this again in the fall in greater detail, but I would be really clear with your kids. You should know, as parents, in a general sense, what you're willing to spend, and don't be afraid to tell them, you know, if you get in there and you don't get any money, you can't go. I mean, unless you have a rich uncle, unless you're very well off, unless you only have one child and you've saved a fortune, it's okay to say no. In my family, I have 3 kids, and they're all in their 30s now. What I did was I set the benchmark of the price of a state college, my husband and I. We said, so that's what we as a family feel is reasonable to pay for college. You know, say a UMass rate, $25,000, $30,000. If you want to go to a school that's more expensive, then you're going to have to get money that brings it down close to that rate. If you don't get any money, it should be off the table, because what you're doing, I mean, I know everybody feels differently about this, about debt, but what the kids don't understand is what we as adults do understand. Debt is with you forever. And they may think at age 18 that they don't care, and I'll just take out loans. But they don't really know what that means. It means that I'm going to be paying thousands of dollars every month. I mean, you hear it on the news with people in massive college debt because they signed up for something they didn't understand. So that's really a discussion. I think it's really, an 18-year-old is not equipped to make a decision to spend all this money without your help in having them comprehend what debt really is. Debt means you don't have a car. Debt means you can't buy a house. Debt means you can't get the job that pays less money because you need the job that pays more money. All those things. So that's my debt lecture. I'm now out of debt, but it has taken us, see, the youngest is 31, and I think we just finished like a few years ago, paying it off over time, Is that it? What's the next one? Okay, so all we want to do for the juniors is say, keep your grades up, schedule your SATs for the spring, look at schools online, maybe do some visits over February or April vacation or summer vacation, create your Common App account over the summer or come to our workshop. Over the summer, I always ask people to do this, but they don't often. Maybe think about a college essay. And it can be anything. That's the thing that really confuses them, and it's not that hard. It's no harder than a typical English essay. As a matter of fact, they could even look at a nice essay they did their junior year and use it, rework it, and the English teacher will help them. When you look at the Common App, you could Google Common App essay questions. There are 7 choices, and one of them is topic of your own choice. And the kids can write about virtually anything, as long as it's just a well thought out, nice essay. And I've seen them on so many different topics. It doesn't have to be, my name is Joe, and I play basketball, and it can be funny, it can be like, an experience you had with a family member, why I like summer camp, something, it could be anything at all that's well written. And our English department is great about editing them, really great. So if they want to maybe do a little draft of that, Google the topic choices, or just write one of your own choice, and give it to the English teacher in the fall, and they'd be happy to look it over. And a lot of them give it as an assignment, their senior English assignment. And in the fall, we will apply to college, and we'll start the dreaded FAFSA, which is really not hard. I'm not a math person at all, and for years I did it every January 2nd. Because it used to be January, now it's October, and I just get on. And the good news is, once you do it, you only update it every year. You don't have to do it all over again. And you can also link your tax returns directly with it. You don't even have to, you can either plug the number in or you can just do an IRS link. Okay? It's easier than you think. Is this this is it. So we're going to take questions. Yeah. Good one. We forgot to mention that, didn't we? I think that's a great idea. So the kids they're going to get a recommendation from us, and this is where we use the college questionnaire that's on Naviance. We ask them to fill that out for us. But they are going to need at least 1 letter from a teacher, and a lot of schools require 2 letters. So it is a really wonderful idea before you leave in June. So anytime from now on, would you write me my college recommendation letter, please? And we'd like them to go in person. Hi, Mrs. Jones. Would you please write me a letter for college? And the teachers have sometimes a form. They'll say, yeah, tell me a little bit about yourself. And they'll give them something to fill out. Okay? That should not wait till the last minute.
And just a question, how do colleges do, for example, let's say that several colleges use Common App. Every time someone asks me to provide a recommendation, they send an online form. I have to actually go.
Right.
Fill in online form.
That's
Is
right.
that how like
Yes.
now they have to go and do one recommendation letter online that will be used by different colleges?
Yes. So the kids will invite the teacher, once they ask and the teacher says yes, the kids will invite them electronically on Naviance, and the teacher will get a link. And then it will link back again to Common App.
Just one thing I wanted to mention. we talk to the kids and encourage them to ask the teachers before the end of the school year, this year, so in May or June, but the teachers typically will not do the letter until summer or fall. And then they will upload it, the kids will invite them in the fall, and that's when the letter gets uploaded. But having the conversation at the end of the year is helpful, just so teachers can get their ducks in a row. Okay. Yes.
Question, touch base a little bit more on the GPA. You mentioned that GPA is getting calculated based on the major subject. Is that for every college or is that?
Typically, most colleges will recalculate the GPA to their specifications, so it could vary depending. A lot of times they may just look at core courses, what language. But if you have a student who's going into music or arts, they may look at those music or art electives. So it really does vary on the college sometimes with what they will pull out to recalculate the GPA.
I would just add, OA uses a pretty traditional GPA scale of like a weighted 4.0 scale. So that, in other words, is for our college prep and elective courses, an A plus is a 4.0. For our honors and AP courses, those are, the GPA scale is on a slightly higher scale where students could earn up to a 5.0 for those particular classes. So that students have sort of what we call a weighted 4.0 GPA. And colleges likely have some version of a weighted 4.0 scale as well. So when colleges are reporting their average GPA, the student's OA GPA is a good frame of reference. Colleges may, like Mrs. Mancuso was mentioning, tweak some things slightly, but it's a pretty decent apples-to-apples comparison when you're looking at the GPA college is reporting, the GPA your students are seeing on their transcript from OA. Yes?
Is there a certain number of colleges you're encouraging the students to apply for?
Not 25.
Not 25. So I would say I have some students that apply to one and get in and they're done. But probably like our, I think, general guidance is 5 to 10. That if they're honest with themselves in the process, both as far as applying to schools they could honestly see themselves going to, and honestly see themselves getting admitted to, they're going to get into several of these schools. There is no need to apply. Even 10 is kind of a high number, to be perfectly honest. But we're not going to stop them either. We have some students that apply in the teens, but exactly, you can stop them. So there is no limit that the Common App or FAFSA prevents students from applying. But yeah, I think a reasonable number is anywhere from typically 5 to 8, maybe 9 or 10 in some circumstances.
My magic number has been 9. I like students, it's on the higher end, but I like to see students have 3 safety schools, so lower level schools that they're going to get into in 2 seconds. 3 target schools, so right on target with whatever their GPA and SAT is, and then 3 reach your dream schools. And then over time, students tend to whittle down, like, oh, that one's $80 to apply to, let's cut that one from the 9. But it's a good balance of like aspiring toward a really high level school, but also having realistic options to fall back onto.
Question on the admission process. I understand the first one, which is the early decision, the contract. That's one. Second one you mentioned, is that more than one school?
Early action you can do for any school.
But will they get their decision from that school at earlier?
They will.
Or-
They get it usually before New Year's, and they don't have to make a decision till May.
Yeah, they're not locked in.
Right. That's just the first.
have the conversation on ambiance. One thing that will really emphasize with students towards the end of this year, and definitely when we meet with them at the start of school in the fall, will be making sure their list in ambiance is correct. And also that the deadlines listed in ambiance are correct. So that if they are planning on applying to colleges, early action, for example, that early action designation is listed in ambiance, because that then becomes our mechanism and the teacher's mechanism to know the deadlines that we need to meet for our students, so to get materials out. And like we were talking about, it's really one letter that's going to all of the colleges. So we're really going to then kind of focus on the earliest deadline every student has. So we will just kind of try our best to make sure that early on they know to list all of their colleges, and then to communicate to us as they go through the process if they subsequently add any colleges later in the process, especially if they're not on the Common App. Because then, like we were talking about, they're not automatically linked to their Naviance account. They have to manually add them in Naviance, which they will need to do. Yes, so all the students have an account. Maybe. Yep, and we're meeting with all of them in the coming weeks, and we'll go over it, especially your juniors in particular have lived the majority of their high school life through COVID, obviously, so a lot of the work we have done with them over the first 2 years has been different than we would have done with them in a normal set of circumstances. So they have Naviance accounts, but perhaps haven't used it up until this point as much as we would have typically used with them in a non-COVID experience.
May I make 2 comments? Is that okay? So first of all, obviously you're all very knowledgeable, but the guidance counselor here at the end, you were so fabulous. Like, everything you said was just it. Was that? You. You were great.
We agree.
I used to be... I used to be in college admissions, and now I do college consulting on the side. So, and then the other thing I just wanted to mention is when I did work in college admissions in Boston, I had this amazing director, and she gave, I think, the best advice I've ever heard to parents, which is do not talk about college with your student more than once a week. They just don't need that stress.
It should be fun. They're in high school. They shouldn't be stressed about this. Life is short, and they should enjoy it.
So colleges can see all other colleges that you apply to, right?
No.
I was told that they can always see all the colleges that you apply to.
So when your student applies to college, they're actually, the college only will know that they're applying, your student's applying to their college. Some colleges do ask in their application questions, what other schools are you applying to? Which is optional, and your student can choose to answer that or not, but that's rare. No, they will not know other colleges your student is applying to. They will only know that they're applying to their college.
And how early, like everyone says about deadlines, so okay, deadline is let's say November 1st. You can do it as early as you want. When is always, like they can apply today?
No.
August 1st is when the year rolls over. Yep.
Please note, if you apply that early, it's likely going to sit there now. Because the admission reps are not, they're on the road, they're not reading at that point. And teachers likely haven't done their letter.
And we have not written it
materials. We will post it on the guidance website tomorrow. And we are very fortunate to have the presentation recorded tonight, so that will also go up on the website sometime next week. And we are here for questions individually if you need anything. Thank you.